In the next 10 minutes, we're going to find out why once you've made these mince pies, you'll never go back to buying them. And we're also going to answer the question, why mince pies were originally served in coffins. That's right, coffins. Stay tuned to find out the answer. Let's cook. And stay tuned to the end to see how I turn this orange peeling into a great Christmas ingredient. So first up, let's make our Christmas sweet pastry. The full recipe's in the link here, and we're going to add some orange zest into that sweet pastry to give it a real Christmassy taste. Oh yeah, that's incredible. You can already smell Christmas coming off it. The smell of the orange oils releasing into the pastry is exactly what we want for our mince pies. I'm going to put this in the fridge for half an hour and let it rest. Now, as it's Christmas, we're going to make it a little bit boozy. I've got a bottle of port here. I'm going to make ourselves a really nice aromatic mulled wine and create our mincemeat out of that. So we're going to take a really robust muscovado sugar, which is really rich, dark and brown, and then mix that with some spices and the port, and then create our mincemeat to give us a really Christmassy, rich flavour inside those mince pies. Okay, I wouldn't call this cheating, I'm going to call it jazzing it up for Christmas. I've got a shop bought mincemeat here, but rather than just putting that straight into the pastry cases, I'm going to jazz it up, like I said, with the port, the muscovado sugar, and to get some fresh ingredients in there like fresh orange, freshly grated apple, and that's going to give it a really rich, robust flavour, and it's going to help soak up all those juices. Okay, so here we go. Let's take some of this and keep it easy, but let's add some of our own ingredients, make it more robust, make it a little bit more sexy. So into our port and sugar mixture, we're going to add half a grated nutmeg, which smells super Christmassy. Okay, now we're going to add our dried fruit, sultanas, mixed peel and raisins. And then into that we're going to add our grated cooking apple. Now let's get that on the heat. So hopefully by now you can see why homemade mince pies are just so much better than shop bought mince pies. That fresh cooking apple adds a real tartness to the mince pie. Now let's add some cinnamon and some ginger and cook that mixture down. Okay, now it's ready to get those other flavours in there, ready to finish off the mincemeat. Look at the colour of that. Okay, let's get in our mincemeat. We're going to spoon in the whole jar and then mix that round. And now we're going to add some ground almonds to soak up some of that Christmas juice. And this is one of the most joyous things about home baking. The aromatic smells coming off the spices and the fruits make it just smells like Christmas. It makes the house smell like Christmas, and that puts everyone in a Christmassy mood. Okay, now the pastry is nice and rested. We're going to flour our table and roll out the pastry nice and thin enough so we can see those flecks of orange in the pastry. As we're using sweet pastry, which is 50% fat, 50% butter, we don't need to grease our trays. They're going to be just good as they are, he says. Okay, now we cut the pastry out, we're going to push it gently into the wells of the tray. The overlap we're going to push down so it's the same depth as the rest of the pastry. Okay, I'm going to give the bases a little fork in. Just prick them on the bottom. I have absolute night terrors about Mary Berry telling me I've got a soggy bottom, which is opposite to my Nigella Lawson dream, to be fair. Anyway, give the bases a little prick. This is going to help them cook in the oven. Okay, now the secret is not to overfill these, so I'm just going for a nice spoonful in each. What we're looking for, it needs to be nice and moist, but not too wet. And now let's top the mince pies. You can add a whole circle just to top it off like a real pie, or you can add little Christmas stars just like this. In Tudor times, the mince pie would represent the baby Jesus manger, and the top was even made to look like the baby Jesus sometimes, and the swaddling on top. Okay, now we're going to pierce some holes in the top of the pastry to allow the steam to leave to give us a nice crispy lid, sprinkle on some caster sugar, and they're good to go in the oven. We are going to pop them in the oven on 180°C for about 15 minutes, or until they're golden brown, just like this. Now allow them to cool for another 15 to 20 minutes, and they should pop out just like this. There's our homemade mince pie. Now you can top them with caster sugar, or you could do this handy little trick that I talked about earlier, using up our leftover orange peel. Okay, so I've dehydrated the orange zest. Okay, when the zest is nice and dry, I'm going to pound it down in my pestle and mortar. You can add it to a spice grinder, which is easier. And we're going to want to grind that down as fine as possible into a powder. Now I'm going to add some grated nutmeg, some ice and sugar, and now we're going to mix those together to give us a nice Christmassy scented powder. I'm putting mine into a little sugar shaker, cheapest chips on Amazon, and it's the perfect sugar to shake over mince pies to give you that festive finish. And now it's time to sit back with a mince pie and a warm cup of tea and learn the history of mince pies. So for the history of mince pies and why were they served in coffins, earliest recorded recipe for this meat-based pie was in 1390 and was called a tart of flesh. In the Middle East, in the Middle Ages, they were using preserving methods to preserve meats, like adding spices and fruits to the meat to help it last longer, obviously before refrigeration. So in the Crusades, that method of preserving was brought back to the UK, and the UK was already famous for pies. The meat and the dried fruits and the spices were packed into these big pastry cases. The mutton was mixed with dried fruits, spices like nutmeg, cinnamon from the Middle East. It was called a coffin. Once the meat and the spices and the fruits were packed into these big pastry boxes, the mutton fat was poured over the top, and this was used to preserve the meat. And hence, this is how mince pies started their life in big pastry coffins. Okay, thanks for watching. I hope you learned some things about mince pies. Make them yourself, make your house smell Christmassy. Thanks to all the comments last week. Thanks to all the new subscribers. Much appreciated. We've hit 1,000. Hooray! Best Christmas present ever. Have a very Merry Christmas. And I'll see you in the next video. Take care now, bye.